The following is paid programming. Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner and founder of Asset Management Resources, LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. We call it Something More because we like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients across the country, your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome back to another episode of Something More with Chris Boyd. My name's Jeff Perry, and I'm sitting in this week for Chris. I'm very happy to have with me Scott Birmingham for this episode. Scott, thanks for joining us again.
Sure, Jeff, no problem.
You know, you're a regular, frequent contributor to the radio show that we do in the podcast, and I've gotten into the habit of just saying, hey, Scott Birmingham is here. And, well, our regular listeners, and I know there are thousands of regular listeners who listen every week, probably know who you are. There's likely people who don't know who you are. So let me just introduce you. You're our lead financial planner at Asset Management Resources, and you're also our chief compliance officer. You have a lot of titles and a lot of credentials, but you're a certified financial planner, which is the highest recognition of those who are working in the financial planning industry. You're also a chartered financial consultant, a chartered life underwriter, you're very chartered, Mr. Birmingham, a chartered advisor in philanthropy. And the reason I wanted you on this segment is you not so long ago became a chartered divorce financial analyst. So I'm sure I didn't get all your designations, but you've been working in the industry for a few decades now, and you have a lot of credentials. And so not just thank you for joining us, thank you for being with us today and talking about a subject that we talk about once in a while, but I wanted to drill down on it a little bit based on a post I saw. You're active on LinkedIn, and I saw a post that was titled, let me get the title right, 13 Mistakes to Avoid When Divorcing Over 50. And it went through some common mistakes. Some of them, you know, as I was reading the article, I said, yeah, I could see people making those mistakes. And a couple of them got me thinking like, that is something that a lot of people probably aren't even contemplating. So before we go through that list and get some commentary from you, I'd like you to start just by explaining to our listeners a term that I've heard you use a few times that maybe others haven't. And it's something that I've heard you say is a growing trend, unfortunately, and that's gray divorce.
It refers to folks who are over the age of 50, I believe, who are divorcing in a larger percentages these days. I think it's like probably the largest percentage group for people getting divorced. And they attribute it to different things, but I think it's more of as people age, the kids go off to school, people have grown apart. People are different from when they married in their 20s or 30s, and I think people are rethinking life in their early 50s. And what do I want for the next 10, 20 years, 30 years in retirement? It's spurred quite a few divorces. That's a very growing population of divorce today. So it's something that needs extra attention and focuses on different things because you're very close to retirement versus, being younger and having time to essentially recover.
You know, I can't personally see it because I'm very happy. I don't want my wife to listen to this segment and think something's up, but no, I'm a very happy guy, but I can see because you get married younger, you may or may not have children. And so the focus is on them or your careers and buying a house, building a life, saving, having goals. Right. And then you get to this point where you're either thinking about or you're in retirement, the kids are out the door. So that focus is gone. Your goals of moving forward, building a career are coming to an end. And then there's this, now what, right? So what's next? And sometimes those next goals or those desired lifestyles are not always jiving with each other.
Yeah. I think there's also less of a stigma around divorce these days. And I don't know when they implemented the no-fault divorce, but I think that's
right.
Allowed that to make divorces a little less without accusatory,
Right. You're absolutely right. There's there's less barriers,
Yeah.
there's less stigma. And so I think when people talk about divorce at any age, but especially when they're older, there's this, if you hear your friends getting divorced who are your age, or, whoever's listening, maybe in their 60s, the initial thing is sadness, surprise, shock, but there's also, a financial side to all of this stuff. And getting divorced when you're 25 because you just picked the wrong person and you have few assets is one calculation, and getting divorced at 65 when your whole life has been intermingled and put together as basically one financial life, usually.
No.
It's complicated, certainly emotional, complicated. And so that's what this article is about, some of those mistakes that people make and to avoid them. The lawyer in me is trying to jump out. So I'll just start off before we go to the list and get your commentary. If you're in that situation where you're thinking about getting a divorce, and I'll target my comments on folks who are older because that's the focus of the segment.
Sure.
Even if you are hopeful and maybe you're in counseling, maybe you're doing your best to work it out. But if you think there's a likelihood of getting divorced, you should do all those things, the counseling and trying to work it out. But you should seek legal advice, and if you have a financial planner, speak to them independently of your spouse. Know your rights. Know what this might look like. Should unfortunately leads to a divorce. So don't wait until you're in the middle of it, I guess is what I'm saying. Don't wait until the legal process is forced upon you to get that legal and financial advice, because you'll be better served if you know the facts or know the likelihood outcome of your financial life and your legal obligations, if you will, before you make these other decisions.
That's a good point, especially on the financial side. I deal with folks who are going through divorce, and usually one person is less informed about the finances, and that's usually the biggest delay to making a divorce go through quickly, is knowing the finances. One person doesn't know about the retirement accounts and the stock options and the crypto, whatever it may be, but it takes months to gather all that data because the other party isn't as forthcoming and you don't know it. So
right,
being organized, getting pros on your team, that helps.
Absolutely. And one of the issues in many divorces, I don't know the statistics, but a large number of divorces are about financial matters, right? And, a few episodes ago, we were talking about a number of things related to divorce, Scott, and including financial infidelity. So you may not even have a real picture. If you're the party who's not the one managing the day-to-day assets of your household, you may not even have an accurate picture of what's going on, right?
Yeah, even if you did, it's laborious to go through and put a detailed report of your expenses to give to the court. You want it in detail, and then even just gathering all your accounts, bank accounts, savings bond you bought 20 years ago over here. It's a lot of work, so
Right.
it takes time.
Right. All right. So let's dive into this list of some things to avoid. This article, by the way, was on Yahoo Finance in September. So if you want to go back to it after you listen to this podcast and read it to be refreshed, you're certainly encouraged to do that. So let's see. There are 13 of them. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them.
No.
But there's a lot of things to focus on. So let's go through them. One of them is forgetting about health insurance.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that.
I don't think it's on a lot of parties' minds. If they've never, so I'll assume the wife does not work in the scenarios. I'm not trying to be critical or.
Sure.
But so the husband has health insurance to work. They're getting divorced. That can be an enormous expense on the spouse who did not have insurance to work. I've seen cases, it's rare, where one spouse will allow the other spouse to remain on their work insurance plan, but that's also up to the work company to decide as well. So it's rare. But either case, now I have to factor in our expenses, a whole thing I've never encountered for, the cost of health insurance for myself, possibly my children, and it's very, very expensive.
Yeah. when I was practicing as an attorney, I did not do divorce law, family law, but I was aware of a case where it was actually the opposite of your scenario, where the wife was the primary breadwinner and the husband, he worked, but she carried the health insurance.
Yeah.
So they had an amicable divorce, which can happen, but they did it on their own. I mean, they went to court, obviously, but they didn't have any advocates or attorneys on their side. And when they reached a settlement agreement, which they both signed, they were both kind of, okay, this is over. He did not negotiate, or he did not attempt to have her continue providing that health insurance. So like 60 days after the divorce, he's without health insurance. So whether or not he could have got it is a legal question and a negotiation question and a rules and regulations of a given employer. But he didn't even foresee, or he didn't even anticipate that this could be an issue. She carried it forever, and it never crossed his mind. So, under the topics of things to avoid, this certainly is one of them. Make sure you know where your health insurance is going to come from, and what, if any, expenses are going to change or shift.
Right. I mean, that list is obviously the big ones, but I think divorce is just one giant pitfall of things that can go wrong that are just so tiny, but they're just so many things, whether it's around credit, health insurance, whatever. It is just so many areas you need to kind of cover yourself on. So it's very tough. It's a lot to think about. You're making giant decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life in a pressure cooker situation.
And for those individuals who are in that scenario that I just described, of having an agreeable spouse and dividing up thinking you can divide up the assets, you very well can do that successfully, but you can still get advice and counsel on the side and not have it be adversarial. You can still speak to your financial planner, get their advice, your accountant, get their advice. You can even have an attorney that's not representing you per se, but giving you advice as you go into this process. And there's also attorneys who will handle both sides of the divorce and be like the facilitator or the mediator, and the services out there. But the purpose of this segment is to go in there with your eyes wide open and understanding, or avoiding, I should say, the mistakes that many people make. And another one of those things is the desire to, one of the parties want to maintain ownership in the marital residence. That usually comes up when there's children involved, or it's a family home. There's some connection or perceived need to keep that house. And so one of the parties might say, I'm gonna take the house as the asset, or however that's viewed in the settlement. And maybe that's not a good financial decision for them, even though there's some emotional reasons, right?
All right. It's probably the biggest one decision that is haggled back and forth, and two, the one that's kind of the most math is done on. Can I afford to keep it?
Right.
The big part is, if you're dividing the house, can I afford to buy out my partner? And these days, essentially, you would need to, unless it's an assumable mortgage, which is maybe done under, if you had a veterans loan, VA loan. Otherwise, you are required to refinance that mortgage if you are essentially splitting the house with taking the house, and your partner is going to get something in return, and you have a mortgage, you have to refinance the mortgage. So, one, you're going from a lower rate to a higher rate today.
True.
Secondly, you need to buy out your partner's equity in the home, probably either through refinance or some other asset if you have it available. But if it's through refinancing, again, you're going from probably what was an attractive rate to a much more expensive rate. And it's a huge mathematical decision, just that part. And then, should you even be keeping the home? Should you both be stepping away and possibly downsizing, or even renting?
Right. And your income, who knows what this hypothetical distribution looks like, but your income's going down. I actually was working with a lady. They weren't married, but they bought a house together. And so the same type of equation, one party wanted to keep the house. And then, so they agreed, in essence, they agreed that one party would buy out the other. And so when the party who wanted the house went to refinance to pay the mortgage off to release the other one, they couldn't get a loan because their income didn't qualify.
Right.
And so it reinforced my point to this party is, maybe it's too expensive they didn't believe me, but when the bank said you can't get the mortgage, they started to question it, and ultimately this house was sold. But there's a lot of emotion attachment to residential properties, especially when the kids are involved. But don't put yourself in a position where you're going to go broke by trying to keep a house that maybe really doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can kind of refer to it as good mom syndrome. They want to stay in the home till the kids have graduated, but which is great. And
well intended for sure.
Yeah, but could have dire consequences long term for your financial picture. So you really need to think long term.
Absolutely. Going back to this list of the things that you want to avoid or be aware of if you're going through a divorce, especially when you're after 50, is disregarding potential tax implications. Tell us more about that, Scott.
Yeah, so I help folks, and attorneys do it too, mediators, help folks divide assets. So you're splitting the home, you're splitting cash accounts, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts. And normally it's just done, whether it's I'll take this asset and you take this, or we divide everything 50-50. There's many ways to do that.
Right.
You need to look at what is the tax effect. So essentially you want to say, if this asset was turned to cash today, which it may need to be,
right,
what is it worth? And that's usually typically not done by the attorney or meter, because it's not usually submittable in court, but it still needs to be looked at and decisions made around it. So cash is cash, cash is king. But you could have a brokerage account with very low cost basis. And if I need to access that money, how much tax will I need to pay? If you're splitting 401ks, when you do need that, what's the tax on that? That's income taxable to you. And if you're pre-59.5, possibly 10% tax penalty as well. So what is the real value? And, it gives the needle a little moving room for discussion. If I'm taking this asset, I think you should make some, adjustments based on the fact that, the real value of this is a bit less. So it's hard to do because, for example, a 401k, the person may not be touching that for 15 years. I don't know what your tax bracket will be in 15 years.
Right.
But we can make some estimates and see if we can maybe come to some agreement to make it a little more realistic and level, I think.
It's a good point. You can, if you're the owner of, say, a brokerage account as one of the parties and you agree to a number, say there's 300,000 in the brokerage account and you agree to give the other party 150, and that's an agreement before you do the taxable trades, if you will. And if you think about it, if someone's older, meaning about 50, as you said, there could be some really long-term significant capital gains embedded in that account.
Yeah.
So a good portion of that may end up to be taxable. And so another thing to avoid, something to think about. And, so these things are things that people going through an emotional process, including a divorce and the distribution of assets, many times people are rushing to get this done or being focused on something other than financial matters. So it really is important that you have some assistance along the way.
On that tax issue as well, I just had a case who referred to the home. So the wife wanted to stay in the home, but there was over $500,000 of capital gain. So if she stayed in the home, decided to sell it, 4 or 5 years later, she would only be able to use her exclusion of $250,000 for capital gains versus if they both sold it now, use the $500,000 of gain exclusion, pay less tax, go their own way. So it was about a $40,000, $45,000 decision that she had to make.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. The situations at the time of the divorce regarding taxes will likely not be the same after the divorce. So there may be opportunities to save taxes as a couple that you won't otherwise be able to get as a single person.
Yeah.
One of the, I guess I would have put this maybe as number one, as most important, but certainly up there is skipping an asset inventory. So you're going through, or you think you're going through a divorce. To me, job one is to say, all right, we need to make a list. First, I need to make a list of what we think we have. The other party I need the list from them, and then we need to compare. And then what I want your comments on, the parties can do that, and they have to do that. Actually, they have to file a financial statement with the court.
Right.
But I'd like your comment on your experience that sometimes things aren't always disclosed?
Yeah.
That
Things are not. No, a lot, I would say, even in cordial ones, attorneys get involved and request, complete financial documents. That things are not given up front easily a lot of time, which is unfortunate. And you need a complete inventory. So I think part of that is, you have to gather as much information as possible. When I sit down with someone, I want to look at 3 years of tax returns. I want to see, what was moving around in those tax returns. A lot of statements, back statements. Because, if someone's getting divorced, they may have been planning to get divorced for 6 months, a year, shifting assets, moving stuff out of brokerage accounts and cash, heavy spending on things, so.
Buying expensive items, right?
Exactly. So, yeah, it's even in the best circumstances, I think it pays to do your due diligence on everything and really do a deep dive into things. Because again, once a decision is made, you can't go back, essentially.
Yeah. So this highlights the point to me that you need to have a good team around you. You're thinking you may get a divorce. So you're thinking, I may need a lawyer. I'm probably going to need a lawyer. Okay, I got that. Working with your financial advisor, it's certainly someone that knows your financial situation, or even if you're not working with a financial advisor, maybe engaging one to review things. And if you have a CPA doing your taxes, that's a great resource for you to check in with, because the tax return is not only going to tell you what you paid in taxes and your income. On those returns, most people, not all, most people are lawfully filing their tax returns. They're including things, and even if they're not, the IRS will figure it out from 1099s and such. So you may see capital gains, dividends, interest from an account. It won't list the account on the tax return, but you may see a number, figure for dividends, capital gains, or maybe even property, maybe even a small business. Who knows? That you were not aware of, or you were not aware of the amount. One party may be self-employed, or one party may have a brokerage account, or there may be some trust income that the party wasn't. You referenced earlier, maybe there's a crypto account somewhere, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things that can be gained from I won't say forensic, I'll say detailed review of a tax return. As well as all these other things that you got to check. Scott, we only have a minute left. Impart upon our listeners, if they're thinking about they might be in this situation, what's kind of the first thing first 1 or 2 things that they should do?
I like the mediator route, but I think you still need an attorney to essentially check over things at the end of the day. So I think you need to engage an attorney, and then some sort of financial professional. Again, whether it's your CPA, whether you're already a planner or a CDFA, run it by them. Even just an hour meeting of just giving you a bit of a game plan and things to look for, I think you'll put yourself in a better space.
Good advice, Scott. As always, thank you for your wisdom and your insight. If you're listening to this and you think that you may need some financial assistance, hopefully it's not on a divorce matter, but if it is, we have people like Scott Birmingham, our lead financial planner, who has credentials in this area. Check us out on the web. Our website is amrfinancial.com. Until next week, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's financial planning, portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at amrfinancial.com or call us toll-free at 866-771-8901 or send us your questions to radio@amrfinancial.com.